Yesterday, Joe, coronavirus is becoming basically the universal story across the board.
Well, it is becoming the universal story. I think people in America are slowly but surely waking up to the real concerns they need to have, especially for their parents, for their grandparents, for people of certain ages, for people with underlying health conditions. What's really concerning me, though, Mika, right now is, especially because of the Dow drop yesterday, you actually have people running around on television saying that the coronavirus is a hoax, that it's just like impeachment, that it's just like the Mueller report. You have actually conservative, well, not conservatives, I'm sorry, but you have Trumpists that are running around saying that this is all concocted by the media as fake news. Remember, the president was saying that the media coverage of this was fake news, and we heard this time and again. But, you know, Willie, it's very interesting. The president, if the president and his supporters believe that this is nothing worse than the flu, which has been suggested, I'm just curious, why is the president's chief of staff this morning in a quarantine?
A self-quarantine.
Why is Ted Cruz going to be in a self-quarantine for 14 days? Because if I'm with you in the same room and you have the flu and you go, I got to go home, have the flu, I go, oh, that's too bad. And I keep working, right? But they now, because they understand, as Ted Cruz said, please understand how important this is, how serious this is, follow science, follow medical advice. They self-quarantine. Why was somebody on Air Force One yesterday from Congress on the plane, and the second he gets a call and finds out that he had exposure, just mere exposure to the coronavirus, they immediately whisked him to a part of Air Force One and basically shut him off in a room. And now he's self-quarantined as well. Willie, they can say it's just like the flu. They can say it's a hoax. But I'm just curious, why doesn't the president, if he really believes that, why doesn't he have his chief of staff come in and sit down and brief him today?
Brand new chief.
Why doesn't he call Ted Cruz and tell Ted to come on up and come in his office today and have a talk with him? Sit in for an hour or two and maybe work through some of these things. Maybe they can be in a small, contained office. You know why? Because Donald Trump understands it's not the flu. He understands that this is an epidemic. Some people are calling it a pandemic. And unless we take those safe precautions that some of Donald Trump supporters are suggesting we don't take, then our health care system is going to look like the stock market looked like yesterday. And a lot of senior citizens, be they Republicans or Democrats, are going to get infected and they're going to die. And the recklessness, the partisanship, the false alternatives, the false realities that these people try to spin out of the White House and these Trump supporters try to spin, let's just call it what it is. It is irresponsible and it is deadly, especially for our senior citizens.
As you say, despite what the president's been tweeting for the last 24 hours, he does now know how serious it is. He's asking questions. He's having to answer questions about whether or not he himself has been tested for coronavirus. The White House says no. Why would he be tested? Because he, too, was at that Republican conservative conference last week.
Well, there are no tests.
Well, that's the other problem. But presumably the President of the United States could get a test. But those congressmen that you talked about, his chief of staff that you talked about, self-quarantined because they were at CPAC last week, the conservative conference. The president was there, too. He was on Air Force One with the Florida congressman that you talked about, who last week was mocking coronavirus by wearing a gas mask into the well of the House. This couldn't be more serious at this point. Just look what's happening in Italy. They've effectively shut down the entire country. The Dow was down 2,000 points yesterday, as you just showed. The president has to be taking this seriously, and it's a crazy thing to say, but at this point, we almost have to look past the president of the United States because we know what he's going to tweet. We know that he's protecting his political hide. We know he wants to win re-election, and just listen to doctors and scientists, people who know what they're talking about, people who can give us real guidance, not through a political lens like the president does on Twitter.
And if this were a conspiracy theory, all to take down Donald Trump, which I can't believe, listen.
Started in China.
I can't believe that anybody in America would be stupid enough to believe that. But I do know that there are people on TV that are Trump apologists who think Americans are that stupid to believe it. But just for people that are positing that stupid theory, ask yourself this. Would Italy shut down completely over a theory to defeat Donald Trump at the polls? No. Would China shut down? Would all these other countries take such extreme measures? I mean, again, it's not logical. It makes no sense, but there are actually people out there who are ignorant enough to believe it. And listen, if you want to spin your ignorant conspiracy theories about Ukraine, if you like the Russians and you want to be a useful idiot for Vladimir Putin, go ahead. Knock yourself out. That's up to you. I mean, I would question my patriotism if I did that. But if you don't mind being a useful idiot for Vladimir Putin, you can do that. But here's the problem with this conspiracy theory. Your parents, your grandparents, seniors that you love, that you go to church with, seniors that you love, that you know, that you've known growing up, you put them at risk unless you treat this for what it is. And this is a health epidemic that many are already calling an international pandemic. Do you know what happens in international pandemics? Millions and millions of people die. In 1919, 50 million people died because they didn't handle it the right way, because they didn't quarantine, because they didn't take the steps we're just now beginning to take, which we should have started a month ago.
Joe, you got countries doing drive-by testing. What are we doing?
Nothing.
People are walking into ERs.
Well,
people are trying to figure out whether they should go to the hospital because it's dangerous to do so.
So let's talk about that, Willie. It's unbelievable. And at St. John's Hospital in the Rockaways, one person walks in that's infected. And because we don't have anything set up like Italy or South Korea where they have drive-by tests, one person walks into an ER room and basically shuts it down. 40 doctors, nurses, healthcare providers have to self-quarantine because they're exposed to this one person with a coronavirus that walks in. Do you think we have any planning like that? The greatest country on the face of the earth? No. We are so far behind on this because we have a president who has been denying for a month that this was anything serious. He thought he could just say, "I've been tough."
How many cases we have? So that we shouldn't even use that number.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, isn't that amazing, Willie, that yesterday he said, oh, well, the flu, you only have like so and so many cases every year, and we only have 500 in this country. Well, because we haven't had the tests, because he botched it up. So we aren't getting the facility. It's so dangerous.
Yeah, those numbers don't begin to tell the story. That number of states probably doesn't begin to tell the story. We had a chance. There's reporting from Politico and others this morning that 2 months ago, the World Health Organization was distributing a test, and the United States was one of the few developing countries that refused to accept that test. We could have been way ahead of this. There have been many mistakes made along the way, but we are where we are. We have to get tests to these municipalities, to these states. We'll have Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City on this morning. I suspect he'll plead again, as he did here last week, for more tests so they can get a real sense, Joe, of how serious this is, how many people actually have it. Because we don't know right now. We know it's more than's being reported, but we don't know what the real number is at this point.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.